Life is always funnier than any jokes we can make up. Good morning. We're learning as a schus for Shlema Filan Chaya Baserach. We're on Sadi Aleph Amid Aleph. We learned last night. I posted it. It was actually 6:00. So we're on Sadi Aleph Amid Aleph. You're on Sadi Amid Aleph. It's the
Sadi Aleph.
Yeah.
So I just didn't grasp.
Right. Yeah. It's.
I see. Learned quite a bit.
Hey, listen, it's a lot of limudim, so it goes on and on. So didn't want to. We gotta catch up a little. Got to keep our head above water at least. So we're about 12 lines down. V'lichtav Rachman al-Fali neder oy We're talking about. So let's just quickly look at the Mishnah on Sadi Yomit Beis for a second. The Mishnah says, "Kol karbanos hatzibur v'yachatun nesachim." All karbanos need nesachim, chutz min habachar v'hamaisa v'pesach v'chatos v'asher. Except for bachar, these when a person has a bachar, so he has to bring the animal as a carbon. V'hamaiser, the 10th animal when he's bringing them into the pasture. V'pesach, the carbon pesach. V'chatos, when someone does the chatos chaylev, a regular chatos for a lab. V'asher, when he brings the asam. All these things are things that a person is required to bring. Those things do not have nesachim. Ella, there's an exception to this exception. The chatas of a mitzvah and the asham of a mitzvah both need nesachim. Keep saying nechasim and it's nesachim. So then we brought a brisa that went through. We learned out from a bunch of limudim from the psukim, back and forth from the psukim. That comes to tell you how we know that generally the rule is that those things that you're mechuyev to bring are going to be mechuyev in nesach. I'm sorry, the things that are nedavas are going to need nesachim. Those things that are not you're mechuyev to bring, you're not going to bring nesachim except for the yasham. So the Gemara asks now. In the parsha Nesachim, it says, "Ulichter Rachman lefalei neder and nedava." There's a pasuk that says, "L'sisam isha l'Hashem oilo izevach lefalei neder and nedava." So lefalei neder and nedava tells you anything that's optional. So what does the pasuk have to say oilo as well? We would have learned things very differently, and this is really the Gemara is pivoting to a new limud, which is why we stopped over here. The Gemara is saying, "V'asisam isha l'Hashem klal." Lafad, that's a klal that says everything needs nesachim. Lafali neder and nedava prat says neder and nedava. So only those things that are nedar and nedavas. L'reich nichaya chazer b'klal klal pratu klal yata and elkena prat ma'prat mafush dava she'ne ba'al chet. I would say rather than something that's a chayva, I would say it's only things that are neder or nedava that's not coming for an avera, right? It's not coming to not necessarily just chayva, but those things that are coming as a kapara. Anything that's not a chait, whether it's a chayv or not. And that would exclude the chatas and the asham that come on chait. But it would include the bechara maisu pesach and those. So from that was in the list of the Mishnah of things that don't have nesachim. So if we were to learn from the klalu pratu klal, we would mistakenly include bechara ma'aser pesach. Talmud loyma oila. That's what we need oila for. So now we're learning it out from a klalu pratu klal, and we say oila to tell you we're not just excluding those things that are ba'al chet, but those things that are chayvus. But those things that are neder nedava are going to be included. The Gemara hashta d'chsev oila. Klal uprat my arbor space. The Gemara says, okay, now that you said oila, so what do I need the whole klal uprat to klal? If it's not telling us the din of what's baal chayt, but rather depends on oila, which is not a chayv, but anything that is a chayv is excluded. So what are we learning from the klal uprat to klal? Ma prat before she'enim mechuyev va'oimid, av kol she'enim mechuyev va'oimid lahavi. It's coming to tell you anything that's you're not mechuyev to bring. Lahavi v'loda is kachim. If you have something, a behemoth that you mekadesh it as a carbon, and then that behema had a vlad, it had a child, that also has to be brought. Utmurasan, someone makes a tmura, they exchange their carbon for another carbon, which also had, the new one has to be brought as well. Like we said, the oil of the kayetz hamizbeach that we had before that you bring from leftover. So those oils also need nesachim. V'asham shenitik l'riyah. Asham that we said those oils like for asham where the bailim died, so it gets put out to pasture and then gets brought the kayetz hamizbeach. So all these things. A carbon that was brought shaloi lishma, that we said it's kosher, but it's loyal b'al shem chayva. All these things are animals that you're not really mechayiv on their own. You're just being mechayiv. You're just bringing them because of a different animal that's mechayiv. So that's why we need the klal prat to include these as well. Okay, now we're going back to the original. So we had a machlokes Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yoshia earlier of what I was telling you. One man said I is coming to tell you that you don't bring a nesachim for an oil sa'oif. The other man said I is coming to tell you that you don't have to bring the two karbanos. You don't need both a neder and a nadav. Maybe I'm sorry. It was a oil and the shlab. Now we have now we're saying that oy is used to, we use it as a drush. We're going to go through all the times it says oy in the parsha. I'm going to ask what do we learn that from the oyes? And it's going to be a succession. This is really all. It's going to be increasingly less likely, or increasingly less likely things that I would have thought until it comes to the biggest chiddush. What is the ayah telling me? It's true. It's I'm sorry. I would have thought that until you bring both a neder and a nedava, if it wouldn't say neder unedava, then I would say you have to bring both a neder and a nedava in order to bring the sacham. I see neder l'chudei l'bay nesacham, v'I see nedava l'chudei l'aysi nesacham. You need nesacham whether even for neder and nedava each on its own. Whether you say harei alai or whether he says hareizu. This is good according to Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yonasan says that whatever it says avav, it says two things. We always look at them separately anyway. So what do I need a oy to tell you that they're separate? We always assume the two things that are listed are separate. I see neder l'chudei l'bay nesachim. I see nedava l'chudei l'bay nesachim. I see neder nedava tiski b'nesachim l'chad. Said ein chanami they would be treated separately, but I would think that maybe if you brought them together, you only need to bring one nesachim for the two of them. Kamash one, that's what it says. Oh, to tell you that they each get their own nesachim, even if you bring both of them. What do we do with the next ay? It says that says in the Parsha nesachim. It's that maybe that's only when you bring one kind of carbon, an oil, for example, with a neder, and you bring a shlamim with a neder. Inami ibcho, you bring oil with a neder and a shlamim with a neder. Aval hecha de kamaisi oilu shlamim beneder, inami oilu shlamim beneder. If you bring two different types of carbonis, either with harezu or harei alai, it makes an oil and shlamim with harezu, or makes an oil and shlamim with harei alai. Shem neder echav, shem neder achasi. Maybe all the nedarim all just bring one nesachim, and one nedav, all the nedavas that he brings. So even if they're different carbonis, even if they're different shemis, you bring one nesachim. Tiski leib and nesachim dechad. Kamash one, Ibn Mayadechem. That's what Ibn Mayadechem tells you, that no, you bring for each neder a separate, or each nedava a separate nesachim. B'chisasa ben bakar oila oizeva achlamali. What is the oy? And when you make a bakar oila oizeva, it's Lamina. Maybe that's only like the previous thing that we learned out, that if he brings the oil and the shlom as a neder, or oil and shlom as a neder, if they have, if they bring two oilers, not the same carbon, but two separate carbon, the same carbon, and one is a neder and a dava, inami shnei shlom mecha beneder medava, aim a shem shlom machasi, shem oil achasi, v'tiske b'nechasim dechad, b'nesachim dechad. You only have to bring one nesachim, one nesach, as long as they're both a oilo, even though one is a neder and one is a dava. Kamashmal. Lafali neder and shlamim lamli. What do you need that? Oy. Sagadat chamina. Hani mehech the mighty shtei oilos. Chada b'neder v'chada b'nedava. I might think that what you bring to nesachim is we have two oilos. One's a neder and dava, like the previous example. Inami shtei shlam chada b'neder v'chada b'nedava. Avalecha the kamaisi shtei oilos b'neder ushtei oilos b'nedava, where he brings two oilers as a neder and two oilers in dava. Inami shnei shlam b'neder, shnei shlam b'nedava. Shem oila echaru v'shem neder echaru. In this case, you both the shem, the carbon is the same, and they're both nedarim. V'tiskule b'nesacham dechad. If you have both factors are the same, maybe you would only bring one nesacham. Kamash malan. No, even in that case, each carbon needs its own nesacham. Okay, that is the end of that sequence. We've gotten to the point, we just built our way up. We said that no matter what the circumstances is, whether they're both shlamim and oilus or separate, whether they're both nadarim or nedavas or separate, or any combination, you're always going to bring separate nesachim for each carbon. Rabbi Yeshua was chaylik again on Rabbi Yochanan before. He said that we learn out that it's two separate nesachim for each carbon, from the fact that the Torah separated bakar and tzayin. It said one pasuk with bakar and one pasuk with tzayin. So it's clear that they each bring their own nesachim. So min habakar min hatzayin lamali. What do we do with min habakar min hatzayin that Rabbi Yochanan had learned out from there that they're separate? So the Gemara sagat chamina hani milibit shrei mini avav chamini tiska ben nesachim dechad. Maybe that's only when it's a bakar and a tzayin. But maybe if they're both the same animal, using the same kind of animal, maybe you only need one nesachim. Kamashmal. The pasuk says, "Kamisbar shatasu kacha tasu le'echad kamisbar." You should do them in the number that you did. That's how many nesachim you did. What does it tell me? Maybe if you bring two, maybe all these things that we said, everything is separate. That's only when they're brought at different times. But maybe if you bring them both at the same time, simultaneously, if you bring two karbanos at the same time, you bring one nesachim. Kamash malon, telling you now. So again, we saw the Mishnah. Back to the Mishnah. We said all karbanos need nesachim. Then we excluded Bechar Ma'aser Pesach Chatas and Asham, that they don't need nesachim. But then the Mishnah had said, but even within Ashamas, there's an exception to the exception that the Asham Mitzayra and the Chatas of a Mitzayra both need nesachim. So that's what the Gemara quotes. What does this come from? The Gemara, the Tan Rabban. The Torah says, what kind? This is in the parsha of Nesachim. It says you should bring shloisha esrayim soilis mincha. Mincha abo and mazevach hakasim medaber. I'm sorry, this is by Asham. It says you should bring shloisha esrayim soilis as a mincha. It's talking about the mincha that comes together with the zevach, and it's saying, what does the pasuk say? So it says you bring it with shemen, and it's talking about the mincha haba mazevach hakasim b'da'at. Maybe it's not talking about the mincha that there are three karbanos that are brought by an asham. I think it's a oila and a shlamim and asham and a chatas and a oila. I think. Hope I got that right. So maybe this mincha, these three esrainim that come as a mincha, are not part of the those karbanis, but they're a separate mincha. The Torah is telling you that there's a standalone mincha that comes when someone is chayiv and asham, but it's not part of the carbon. And we know that a mincha that goes with ne'atzim, it doesn't need nesachim. Since the Torah says, so it's putting together the mincha together with the oil. Okay, so we said that the mincha comes together with the carbonis of the mitzvah. But how do we know that that's a mincha that brings with it nesachim? They have to do the wine and the oil that comes with a mincha. So this is the parsha of nesachim, and it says you bring yayin l'nesach reviyas ahin. You bring a quarter of a hin of yayin as in nesachim. Tasa lo'oilo lezevach keves ha'echad. The keves ha'echad. You should bring it up for an oilo or for when you bring a keves ha'echad. So we're gonna go through this pasuk in great detail. Yayin l'nesach reviyas ahin tasa lo'oilo lezevach keves ha'echad. Oilo. So when it says oilo zu oilo mitzayir, zevach when it says zevach zu chatas mitzayir. These are the two karbanos of the mitzayir, the oil and the chatas of the mitzayir. Oil zevach zu asham mitzayir, and oil zevach is the asham. So all three. When the Torah we have three extra drashas ribuyim by nesachim. So we say those are referring to the three karbanos of an asham that each of them needs nesachim. So Gemara typically travayim zevach. What do we need a separate pasuk for chatas and asham? Let's say it says zevach. Which travay? I should really look that up. Typically travay chatas v'asham. Let's say the chatas and asham both can be learned out from zevach. Why do we need a separate pasuk for zevach and asham? The Amar Mar. Where do we know that both chatas and asham can be learned out from the same pasuk? The Amar Mar. Chatas v'asham minayin. How do we know chatas v'asham? This is talking about a nazir that he has to burn his hair underneath the carbon when it's being burnt. When the carbon is being burnt, he takes his hair, he cuts it off, and he throws it into under the fire where it's being cooked. So we say it could be either one of the karbanos of a nazir. It could be either the chatas or asham. Talmud Laim is zevach. It says zevach, so it means any one of the karbanos. So you see, zevach can mean both chatas and asham. By nazir, both the chatas and asham are the same. They're both coming to provide to be machshir the nazir. But by a mitzayra, they are distinct. Let's see Rashi. Aval hacha, the last wide line in Rashi on the top. The mitzayra, the asham lahachshira lovay b'manchana. The asham of the mitzayra is coming to allow the person to return. It's to facilitate his return. Asi v'chat is a chaper. Al zayim doim negoyim boyin. The chatas of a mitzayra is coming to be mechaper for whatever avera it was. I always grew up that it was lashon hara, right? Become mitzayra for lashon hara from Miriam, but one of the seven. So that's a kapara for one of the averas. So that's why you need two psukim because they're brought for different reasons. So the brisa continued, right? So we said. One is to tell you chatas and one is to tell you asham. Zevach zu chatas. The Brisa said zevach is telling you chatas mitzayra. Be'em zu chatas v'asham the nazir. Maybe how do we? So now we just once we brought up nazir, we'll say why? How do you know that this pasuk, this extra riboy, by the parsha of Nesachim, how do you know that's talking about chatas mitzayra? Maybe it's talking about chatas and asham and nazir. So the time menachos niskeim ba'ilosay ubishlama. The pasuk says menachos niskeim ba'ilosay ubishlama v'katzim b'dam. It's talking about the oil and shlamim of a nazir. Maybe it's even talking about the chatas. The Torah says that ayil should be a zevach shlamim and menachos niskeim. Ayil b'chlal avilama yatsa. Why was the ayil? Why did the ayil have to be? It said zevach. It said all the karbanos. Why do I have to say ayil specifically? Hagshlam. Ma'am yuchad ba b'neder b'dav. Av kol ba beneder uvnadav. So therefore, we already have a pasuk saying bedafka that that only those things that's ba beneder and dav need nesachim, and not the chatas and asham of a nazir. So therefore, this pasuk over here can't be including the neder and davar of a nazir, since it was excluded in the parsha of nazir. So our Bryce had said oila zu oilos mitzayra. When it says oila by nesachim, it's talking about the oila mitzayra. Ve'emazu oila yeledis. Maybe this is the oila that's brought by a woman who gives birth. She has to bring a carbon oila. That also needs nesachim, instead of saying the oila mitzayra needs nesachim. Amrabaya oila yeledis misave the kronafka. We have a different pasuk tell you the oila yeledis. The Tanya. Nasan lekevezu oila yeledis. The kaves that it says in the pasuk, that's talking about the Eliyadis. This is the pasuk. Let's read the pasuk again. The pasuk says, "V'yayin l'neser kaviyas ayin tasa ala oila zebach lekeves ha'echad." So we say the word lekeves is telling you the Eliyadis. Echad is telling you the achad asher meiser shekarav shlomim. That when someone is counting his meiser, so he takes every 10th animal, he sets aside his meiser. If he got mixed up and he added a 11th that he was Makadish, he was Makadish it as Meiser mistakenly, so it becomes automatically, instead of a Meiser, it becomes a Shlom. So we're saying that Shlomim that comes from a mistaken Meiser has a din nesachim. Generally, the Meiser itself doesn't have nesachim. And now this Meiser that turned into a Shlomim because of your mistake gets nesachim. So we need a pasuk to tell you, I might think this shlomim is excluded from the sachim, because since the thing that originated from the meiser doesn't have a sachim. So that's why we need the pasuk to tell you it also needs a sachim. Rava says a different. This is all to tell you, how do we know that the 3 rubuyim over here are all talking about the mitzayra? It's telling you the chatas and the asham and the ayla. So he says, we said maybe it's talking about the Nazir. Rava says it can't be talking about the Nazir. The Nazir has 4 karbanos, so we have 3 ribuyim. So you'd rather fit the 3 ribuyim for the 3 karbanos of Mitzayra and not try to put a square peg into a round hole to have it talk about Nazir, which has 4 karbanos. La'ayel lamali. Why does the pasuk have to say, Oy la'ayel tasa mincha sel shnei yisrael b'lu b'Hashem and shlish zein? Why do you have to say that in the parsha Nesachim la'ayel? We know we're talking about an ayil. It's to include the ayil that's brought by Aaron on Yom Kippur. We already learned this a blot ago, that the karbanos that are brought on Yom Tif do need nesachim, even though they're chayva. But if they come on Yom Tif, then they do need nesachim. That's only the karbanos tzibah that come on Yom Tif. This is brought by Aaron, the Kohen Gadol. But we just said that we know that the Eilus Yeledis is brought by a Yachid, needs Nesachim. So why would I think this oil that's required to be brought is by a Yachid? That's a reason that it shouldn't have Nesachim. That's only that we Eilus Yeledis that's not at a particular time. Maybe there's no Nesachim on things that are supposed to be brought at a particular time by a Yachid. And that no. The Eilish Aaron also needs Nisach. Oila ayel lamali. What does it say? Oila ayel. What is that oil telling you? The Rabbah says hapalgas. That's coming to include there. We know that there's such a thing as a lamb, and there's a ayel, which is a ram, which is a year old. The lamb is up to 1 year old, and the ram is the 2nd year. But what about this? There's a certain period in between. The first month of the 2nd year, from the sheep's birthday till its 13th month, till the 13th month to 1 month later, there's a machlekes of whether that has a different status. So this is coming to include that during that 1 month that it also needs nesachim. He says that this 13th month is a whole different thing on its own, and therefore it's not included as either a lamb or as a ayil. The Tanan. If someone brings, you're not supposed to bring when an animal isn't that time, because it's not, when those things that need an ayil, it's not an ayil, and those things that need a keves, it's not a keves. So if he did bring it, he brings the nesacham as ayil. It's not going to be. He's not going to get the credit. He's not going to get the ritzui that he needed from the carbon because he has to bring an ayil. Avam Rabbi Yochanan ayil l'rabas apagas. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's what you need it to be marba the palgas. That's a whole new thing. Ela bar pada damar, he disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan, and he says it's not a new thing. The palgas is not a totally separate. That he says you bring it and you make a t'nai. The sveiko, he says it's a suffix whether it's a ayel or a chata. So you bring it. Let's say you need to bring an ayel. You say if it's supposed to be an ayel, if this is really an ayel, then it should be treated as an ayel, and this is the mincha that comes with the ayel, which is 2 esrainim. And if it's really a palgas is not an ayel, it's a keves, then I want it to be an adava, and it should only bring one of the esrainim should be the mincha. So what do you need a pasuk? It's a kral or buya sveika. Does the Torah have to address to say what the status is of a suffix? So Gemara vada lebar pada kasha enechanami. It's shver according to bar pada. So Gemara kacha yasel ashara echad elayel echad elesebak fasam may beizin. We said this is in the parsha of Nesachim. We said this is the pasuk says this is what you should do for the shar echad or the ayel echad or leseh bak fasam may beizin for a sheep by the kvasim, by the sheep, by the seh means either flocks of either sheep or goats. The shor echad matam. What is the Torah telling you when it says shor echad? Since the Torah is mechalik between a ram and a lamb, between a 2-year-old sheep and a 1-year-old sheep, maybe I'll make the same distinction by cows between a calf and a 2-year-old cow. That's what the Torah says. Shor echad is only one. A shor, every shor gets 3 esrainim. Oil ayil matam. What does the Torah say? Oil ayil. Since by a sheep we make a difference between 1-year-old and 2 years old, maybe it'll also be mechalek between a 2-year-old sheep and a 3-year-old sheep. Once you pass the lamb stage, they're all the same. Oil of sebat fase matam. What does the Torah tell you by silak chafim? Since we find that the Torah is mechalek between a lamb and a sheep, maybe we'll also that's not a. I keep on translating it as a lamb and an older sheep, but it's really an ayel is a male sheep. It's only mechalek between a 1 and a 2-year-old by the male sheep. So maybe I would think you do the same thing by the female sheep to be mechalek between a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. By kvasim, that it's always going to be treated the same. So tomorrow, what does it say by goats? Since by sheep we're mechalek between 1 year and 2 year, maybe we'll also be mechalek by goats between 1 year and 2 year. Amara Papa Badik Lon Rava. Rava asked the following question: Yes, how much do you give for a female older sheep? When this is all talking about how much people would pay when they would come to Yerushalayim, they would bring money to pay for their nesachim. They would bring an animal, and then the nesachim they didn't bring with them. They would go and pay, and then they would get to receive the nesachim that was supposed to come with their animal. So we say when person got for a gedi, it was all the same, whether it was a rechela, whether it was zachar or nekeva, whether it was big or small. The only thing that was different, as far as flocks were concerned, with a male sheep. That there it was a different amount for a 2-year-old male sheep. But as far as gedim, it doesn't make a difference. And as far as female sheep, it also doesn't make a difference whether they're 1 or 2 years old. Okay, we'll stop over here. Yasher Koyach.
Sure.